In this video, we're going to take a look at parallel and perpendicular lines, see if we can find some relationships between them, and hopefully help you answer questions about them. So, first of all, parallel lines, right? Parallel lines means lines that are at the same angle. They're never going to touch each other. And that must mean one thing that's useful for us at least, and that is that the gradient or the steepness of these lines are going to be exactly the same. And from our previous work, we know what gradient is in the context of a line equation. It's that number there, look, in front of the x. So in these three examples, look, they all have the same gradient. These are all parallel lines. Y equals 4x minus 2, y equals 4x, and y equals 4x plus 10. They're all going to be parallel with one another because they all have the same gradient. So in this quick example, look, if I was matching pairs of parallel lines, clearly, look, A and C are both parallel because they have the same gradient, and B and D are parallel because they have the same gradient too. Okay, so that's one quick, easy thing to understand. What about perpendicular lines? Now, perpendicular lines are lines that are at 90 degrees from one another. So is there a relationship between the gradients of these lines? Well, to help us figure this out, let's try to use this as an example. Let's work out the gradients of these lines A and B and see if there is a link between the two. So I can just take any 2 points on a line, look, okay. I can find the change in y, which is 4, okay, change in x, which is 2. So the gradient of line A is 4 over 2, which is 2, okay. Now let's take line B, this one. If I take any 2 points again, look, okay, I'm going down 2 this time, going across 4. So my gradient here of line B is going to be minus 2 over 4, which is minus a half. Okay, so what's the link then between the 2 and the minus a half? Is there something there that can help us to see that these two lines must be perpendicular? Now, it isn't really obvious from just one example. We need to see a few more, but they are related because one is the negative reciprocal of the other. Okay, and if we don't know about reciprocals, we 3 and a third are reciprocal, 5 and a fifth are reciprocal. The only difference here is if they're going to be perpendicular, one of these numbers must be negative. Okay, there is a link between them. So, okay, that can be summarized as the following. If A and B are perpendicular, we could say, well, the gradient of B is minus 1 divided by the gradient of A. Or another quick way of thinking about this is if I get the two gradients, look, and I multiply them together, I'm always going to get minus 1. That's really quite a useful way to think about this. Think about it. 2 times minus a half is always going to equal minus 1. Anytime you can find that relationship, you know if you've got those gradients, you're dealing with perpendicular lines. Okay, so let's take a look at these 5 lines here and see if we can find some that are perpendicular. So the first question is, what's perpendicular to A? Well, A has a gradient of 5, so a perpendicular line is going to be one with a gradient of minus 1 over 5, and clearly that is D. Think about it. If I did 5 multiplied by minus 1 over 5, yep, that's going to give me minus 1. What about B? Well, B, y equals a half x plus 4. We need to think, well, what is going to multiply by a half to get minus 1? Well, that is going to have to be minus 2. So that means that E is going to be perpendicular because minus 2 times a half is equal to minus 1. Okay, what's not perpendicular to any of the other lines? Well, that is going to have to be this 2x plus 1 here, C. Okay, let's carry on. Let's do another question. Right, a line has equation y equals 4x plus 3. write down the equation of two lines that are parallel to this. Okay, y equals 4x plus 3. Okay, well, we could have, well, as long as we keep that gradient the same, we could write anything as the intercept. Y equals 4x plus 7, perhaps. Y equals 4x minus 99. They are both lines that are parallel to 4x plus 3. For part B, write down two equations that are perpendicular. Well, I need to find the negative reciprocal of 4, first of all. So I'll flip it over and make it negative. And that means any line I write down is going to have a gradient of minus a quarter. So y equals minus a quarter x minus 2, y equals minus a quarter x plus 7. They're all going to be perpendicular as long as they've got that gradient of minus a quarter. Okay, I hope that helps you to understand a little bit more about parallel and perpendicular lines.